Well, it is a pleasure to be with you this morning, and I really thank you for making the time. It really is humbling for me to meet you and to see you and talk to you. I visited with most of you this morning before we got started, and you really are just wonderful people doing wonderful things. I think you should give yourselves a little hand, because you are amazing. You are amazing. I want to thank Chris and UNA for having me here today. It's really an honor for me. I'm grateful for the opportunity. I want to express my appreciation to American Express for their sponsorship for this, as well as for to the Utah Division of Arts and Museums, and of course our hosts, the Utah Food Bank today. Thank you. I noticed that Chris, who of course was just speaking to us, looks an awful lot like Paula Abdul, don't you think? I think quite a resemblance there. I want to tell you a little story before we get started in earnest. When I was 11 years old, the Teton Dam near Rexburg, Idaho, failed when they filled the reservoir the first time. As soon as they put water behind that dam, it failed. And it destroyed or damaged about 80% of the structures in Rexburg. Just really wiped out the town. And you know, it's part of that pioneer community that populated the West here, and so people from all around the whole region started trekking in to Rexburg to help. And my father came to me one day and he said, tomorrow I'm going to go on the bus and we're going to go help in Rexburg. We're going to dig the muck and mud out of basements and whatever they need us to do. And you know, digging muck and mud sounded like a good thing to me. I was 11. And so we got on the bus at 2 o'clock in the morning, drove until dawn, worked until dark, got back on the bus, got home around 1 o'clock in the morning. Now, you may not have noticed, but I'm not an especially big guy now. Picture me at age 11, right? You know, lifting the shovel was a lot of work. Forget putting any mud or muck in the shovel. So I'm not sure I did any good. But I sure felt like I did some good, right? I just felt amazing. And I thought, wow, I promise, I never will miss an opportunity to be of help like this. Well, I have missed lots of opportunities to help. I haven't always done the good I ought to have done. But 3 years ago, I lost my job as the chief financial officer for a global food and beverage company, and I said, you know what? I'm going to try and do something a little different. And so since then, I've tried to focus my energy more on doing good. I went to China with my wife. We spent a year there teaching at South China University of Technology. While I was there, I wrote a book called Your Mark on the World about doing good in the world. And I've tried to follow my own advice since then. So that's kind of who I am. And I recognize I'm late to the party. You guys have been having the party for a long time. You've been doing the hard work, you've been making the sacrifices, and I'm kind of a Johnny-come-lately, and I appreciate you, your willingness to work with me today. Let's talk about crowdfunding. So crowdfunding is, when I talk about crowdfunding, I want to make sure we're using kind of language that we all understand. And I'm talking about using a third-party website to raise money from the public. There are 3 primary models of crowdfunding, and we're going to talk principally about donations-based crowdfunding today, where you're really not delivering products or services or selling investments, but another kind of crowdfunding would involve offering up rewards or products, sometimes called pre-tailing. The best example of that might be a band that decides that they want to do a CD. They would raise the money for the studio time before they cut the album. So they essentially sell the album on Kickstarter before they make the album, go make the album, and then they deliver the album to their customers, right? So that's sometimes called pre-tailing. And in 2012, President Obama signed a law that makes it legal to crowdfund securities. And the SEC is scrambling now to write the rules for investment crowdfunding. And we're not going to talk about that today, but for entrepreneurs who are trying to start businesses, that's a very important development. Let me tell you the story of one young woman named Jennifer Windrum. Her mother passed away a year ago from cancer. And it really had inspired Jennifer as she watched her mother's illness to help her. She had given her a couple of sock monkeys. And her mother really clung to these. She lived about 1,200 miles from her mother. I think Jennifer lives in Arizona, and her mother lived in Oklahoma. So she couldn't be with her while she was sick. So she wanted to give her something, so she gave her sock monkeys, and her mother loved them, so she decided to create a business around selling sock monkeys to fight cancer. So she calls them the SMAC monkeys, Sock Monkeys Against Cancer. She raised $35,000, essentially all by herself, using crowdfunding. And I think it's a really good example. She did an extraordinary job of crowdfunding and was very successful with it. How many of you would like $35,000 for your organization? Okay, I saw a few of you didn't like $35,000. So if you don't want $35,000 for your organization, okay. But Live More Awesome. This is a fellow named Jimmy Hunt in New Zealand. Was trying to raise money to bring awareness to and provide support for people who struggled with depression. New Zealand is unique, or at least unusual, because in New Zealand it is men, far more than women, who struggle with depression. Whereas in most of the world, Laura, right, it's women who struggle with depression more than men. And but Jimmy organized this big event to raise money and awareness, and he sold tickets essentially to participate in the world's largest ever water slide. And he just put it on the side of a big hill. He got a farmer to donate the use of his land for a few days, and then they carved the water slide into the hill and put tarps down. Anyway, he was able to sell tickets all around the world because he got such great attention for this using the media. And so he sold, for those who couldn't come, he would float a little rubber ducky down the, and you can see those not very well in the picture on the right. Vivian Haar. How many have heard of Vivian's story? Vivian Haar's Make a Stand Lemonade. Anybody heard of her? Okay, they've got one hand in the back. She really is remarkable, and she has become fairly well known. She was actually invited to help ring the bell on the first day of trading for Twitter because she had used Twitter to help raise money for her cause. But let me tell you her story. She was 8 years old, and her parents bought a book at a Lisa Christine gallery. I don't know if any of you are familiar with Lisa Christine, but she is a well-known photographer, and she shoots photography of poor people in various situations of really tragic circumstances. And one of her focuses especially is on people who are living in slavery. And so Vivian's parents brought this book home. And one of the images in the book was two little boys. And they had rocks strapped to their heads. And they would carry them resting on their backs but strapped to their heads. And the rocks clearly weighed more than the boys. These are little 60-pound, 8-year-old boys carrying 100-pound, 80 to 100-pound rocks. So they're bent over, and they're holding hands, these two little boys, as they walk along carrying these rocks. And so Vivian says to her parents, "What's going on? Why are these little boys carrying rocks?" She says, "Well, you know, they're slaves." And she said, "Well, I thought Abraham Lincoln got rid of slavery." She said, "Well, no, not all slavery everywhere." And Vivian just said, "I've got to do something about this. That is just not acceptable." I mean, can you imagine an 8-year-old girl taking the responsibility to solve this problem? So she began doing a lemonade stand every day. And she did it for a year. And as she gained momentum and success in the lemonade stand, she moved the campaign online and started raising money online through crowdfunding and using Twitter especially. And she was able to raise $100,000 in the course of a year to help end child slavery. Well, she is just a remarkable, inspirational little girl. I've had the chance to visit with her and write about her a fair bit. She's just a delight. And of course, she's got a very, very supportive father. They raised $400,000 using crowdfunding last year to launch a social enterprise, Make a Stand Lemonade. You can now buy it in the grocery store, and 5% of the revenue from that organization now goes directly to 5 charities fighting human trafficking. So great, great organization. As we talk about crowdfunding today, I want to walk through the mechanics with you. We're going to use an unfriendly but apt metaphor. It's kind of a military metaphor, and I apologize for that. I don't like, I certainly thank all the veterans in the room. How many veterans are in the room today? We don't. Great, great. I'm glad we do have representing and serving veterans. I don't want to take anything away from our veterans, but I'm not a big fan of military action. I'm glad we have people willing to serve. But we're going to use a military metaphor to describe crowdfunding. And so we're going to start with reconnaissance, we're going to go to preparation, then we're going to make a ground assault and follow up with an air attack. Now, anyone who knows much about military, and I don't, but would say that the air attack would usually go before the ground assault, but not in crowdfunding. And we'll talk about why later. But one of the things I want you to understand, and I want you to focus on this primarily as we look at this screen. We've got 12 weeks, right? And the crowdfunding campaign itself is going on just at the end. Now, it might be one day, like the Love Utah, Give Utah campaign on March 20th of this year. It might be 30 days. That's a pretty typical time. It might be 60 days. But generally speaking, it's going to be a finite period of time of about 30 days. You're going to take about 8 weeks before the crowdfunding campaign starts just to get ready. So we're going to walk through that process now. The first thing we've got to do is reconnaissance, right? And so the goal of the reconnaissance is to figure out what's going on. Now, how many of you have done crowdfunding in the past? Okay, who's had a great experience with crowdfunding that wants to share a little bit? Oh, come on, somebody's had. Okay, come on up here. Tell us a little bit. See, I'm going to give you
the only experience. I'm Katie Andrews. I'm with the Salt Lake Arts Academy. We're a small charter school downtown. And my only experience, our only experience with it has been with Love Give Utah.
Right,
and
great.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing your story.
We were very uncertain about what to what to put into it, and I am a one-person operation at school and I'm somewhat technologically competent, but didn't know how much I wasn't. And the day of, I was shocked at how our small amount of, we have maybe 700 Facebook likes really pushed out to our community, and our parent community pushed out across the country with donors that I had never touched before.
Wow.
And we ended up winning one of the prizes in our category and ended the day at about $7,000.
That's great. Well, congratulations. So that's a great example of how crowdfunding works. And we'll talk a little bit about why an organization like a school connects with people a little bit and how you can create some of that appeal yourselves. But as we talk about assessing crowdfunding, our goal is to try and figure out whether it will work well for us and what we need to do to make sure that it does reach its full potential for our organization. So you're going to think about your cause, your campaign. You're going to think about your team, think about your network. You're going to think about which platforms you ought to use. And finally, we'll talk about identifying the media that might be willing to write about and cover your story. So first, let's talk about the assessment of the cause, the team, and your network. And the first thing we're going to talk about here is the cause. Now, some of these things are inherent in your cause. You can't change them. Others can be changed, right? You can, for instance, we'll talk about face first. And you literally want to have sort of a spokesperson or a face that represents your cause. Well, you get to choose that regardless of what your cause is. You can probably choose that person. So that's an opportunity for you to enhance or at least optimize your presentation. But some of these other things may be a little more inherent. But let's start with the face. You really want to have a face, a spokesperson, a poster child for your campaign that represents you well and effectively. It is tempting for sometimes, and we do this at Love Utah, Give Utah too much. We make this mistake. We use the logo a lot. We use Utah iconography. So we use pictures of the Capitol building and delicate arch to represent Utah. And so we have in our campaign of Love Utah, Give Utah, we have oftentimes omitted people and faces. It really is, people relate for some reason to a face. Now, it doesn't have to be a human face. How many of you are with organizations that support or do something with animals? I think there were a few of you that came in, right? So a furry face works just as well. Very compelling. People love puppies and critters, so absolutely doesn't have to be a human face, but people love to see something with two eyes looking back. The words, right? You can't use, your message is not your face. It's a little different thing and other objects. So you want to have that, find a face. And as we go through these things, we're going to go through 6 categories. I want you to score yourself on a scale of 1 to 5 on each one of these. And I want you to think about, as objectively as you can, what you think you deserve as I talk about the value. So if you have a really compelling face, so if you help small children and you can get an adorable small child or a cute puppy dog or something for your campaign, that's a 5. And so think about the kinds of people that you could get for your spokesman. Urgency. One of the biggest challenges everyone in this room faces with crowdfunding is lack of urgency. Most of us represent organizations that are battling long-term chronic problems. And that tends to minimize in the minds of the public the urgency. You all feel like your cause is urgent because you understand there are people that will go without services. People may die, right? People may die if you don't do what you do, whether it's feeding people, providing medical care, providing counseling. I mean, there are so many people in here who are literally doing life and death stuff, right? And yet, the public feels like, well, that's just permanent. It's a permanent part of the human condition, and we always have to fight it. So urgency is a big challenge for us in the room. And let me give you an example, just so you're clear on what I'm talking about. But the Haiti earthquake, the Japanese tsunami, the Boston bombing, those kinds of things create piles of money. I mean, billions of dollars sometimes very quickly. The Haiti earthquake, we raised billions of dollars in America for the Haiti earthquake relief effort in a matter of weeks or months. And yet, it would be very challenging to create that sense of urgency with the American Cancer Society, for instance. It's just a different challenge. And so we have to be honest as you can about urgency. We're going to talk about another way to develop that in a somewhat artificial way in a minute. Let's talk about politics. The politics of a cause can be potentially troublesome. And sometimes those things that are most politically challenging, politically difficult, are things that will get our base motivated. But sometimes it's hard to spread that word a little bit. And let me just make the point clear, and I don't want to offend anybody, but I know I'll get feelings just riled up when I say it. But right, if I just say same-sex marriage in Utah, right, there immediately you can sense the feelings. And some of you already just feel anxious because you feel strongly on one side or the other of that issue. And so you can imagine how if you're trying to do a crowdfunding campaign, you might have a challenge in getting your supporters to campaign for you because they don't want to pick a fight with their friends and their neighbors, right? So if your cause has elements of that, you may be challenged. Now, a lot of you work for causes where that would not be an issue, at least not obviously. If you are battling cancer, there's no one out there that's in favor of cancer, right? So you don't have that kind of a challenge. But we've got Susan G. Komen represented here. I forgot your name. Debbie, that's right. Debbie. Now, you've probably run into this from time to time. I use your organization always as an example. You have been so fabulously successful. And there are other people now campaigning for breast cancer research as well. And one of the things that's happened is it's become a little bit popular, a little bit sexy, quite literally, in some cases. And part of what's happened is people who campaign for other cancers and other diseases sometimes get jealous because there is so much attention around breast cancer. Have you ever observed that?
Yeah, there's a Too Much Pain campaign every October.
Yeah, so it is an interesting dynamic. So I don't mean to suggest that on a scale of 1 to 5 that you would give Susan G. Komen a 2 or a 1. No, but it's probably a 4 and not a 5, as much as we can all agree that we should be fighting cancer. Breast cancer has become a little bit politicized because it's so popular. So that's just an example. Geography. Most of you are working with organizations that are local, right? And that's one of the great advantages of a school in a crowdfunding campaign is it is inherently local. And that works to your great advantage. Now, I think we've got a couple folks here from the Willesabugu project, right? And so yours isn't local. And you'll run into a little bit of more of a challenge. And I know you've raised a lot of money over the years and you've done a lot of good. But if we were to, the way I explain this issue is if we were to say that there is right here in Salt Lake City, we found a mother living with 3 children in a mud hut down by the Jordan River, it would take us about 24 hours to raise all the money we would need to completely change their situation, right? We would find it absolutely unacceptable that one family is living in a mud hut in that situation. Well, we would raise thousands and thousands of dollars, tens of thousands of dollars. They'd be on the news, there'd be campaigns. It would just be unacceptable in our community. Well, how many people live that way in and around Wolasabugu? Probably lots, right? And we haven't been able to create that same sense of urgency here in Salt Lake to address all of the issues there. So it is more challenging to save money or to raise money for people far away. So score yourself accordingly. Now, does that mean you can't raise money for Wolasabugu? No, that doesn't mean that. But it means that as you score yourself, one of the things you're fighting is the distance, the remoteness of that campaign, of the people you're helping. Now, with respect to community, I want to step away from community geographically and talk about community of interest. So there are all kinds of different communities, right? You might be a Methodist, and so you could connect in with Methodists theoretically all around the world. You might be a member of Rotary like I am, and so you'd be able to connect with Rotarians all the way around the world. You might be a football fan, and so you can connect with football fans or soccer fans. There are all kinds of different communities. As you think about this for crowdfunding, think about whether there is a natural affiliation to a community, and then whether or not you can actually communicate with them. I did some work with the First United Methodist Church last month on their crowdfunding campaign. Do any of you remember seeing that on the news? I think both Channel 2 and Channel 5 covered that on the news. Great story. They were raising money for their organ. And they got great momentum here in the local community. But one of the things that was disappointing to me was that they didn't have a good way to connect in with sort of the global Methodist community. They were not able to tap into that, which was disappointing. So you not only have to be a part of the community in a natural way, you have to have some ability to communicate with your community as well. So score yourself on that criteria. Now last, let's talk about a project or an event. This is another way to look at urgency. So I'm kind of cheating with this, but if you are, let me give you a really good example. Right? The classic example of a good project for crowdfunding is we're going to build a school in Pakistan. We need $50,000. As soon as we have the $50,000, we'll go build the school in Pakistan. Right? That is your perfect kind of 5-star crowdfunding project, because the project doesn't happen unless you raise the money, and it happens as soon as you do raise the money, right? That's a very natural. It creates a certain urgency that didn't exist before. If you're saying we are about educating children, right? That's really our goal. That problem isn't urgent. Building a school before the snow falls in Pakistan can become urgent, right? It becomes very specific. So think about ways that you can create a project or an event, and the event can just be a fundraising event, like a 10K or a 5K. Those kinds of things can be very impactful in creating that kind of urgency. And in Utah, we've got a great one that's very natural, and that is the Love Utah, Give Utah campaign. If you participate in that campaign, that is an event. And someone else is doing a lot of the work to create the eventness around that. So you can piggyback on that. And if you make that a part of your annual development plan, you can kind of roll into that fairly easily and piggyback on that event. So score yourselves on these 6 criteria, 5 points per, and we'll come back to what that means in a few minutes. Yes.
On politics, when you identified the divisiveness,
Yes.
if it's divisive, then that's a lower score? Or
Yes.
a lower score?
That is a lower score. And on those things that are divisive, oftentimes your base is more fired up. So that does tend to help get your base going. The challenge is for crowdfunding, in terms of spreading the word, that's where your challenge comes in, because if people are nervous about offending their friends, they may be less vocal about the cause. So let's talk about assessing the team. The team is the people that are actually going to be working on the fundraising with you. And I want to focus especially on two tiers. There are kind of three tiers, but I'm going to focus most of my discussion on the first two. So the first tier are the people that I want to call your partners. So presumably, if we're doing a crowdfunding campaign in any of your organizations, if you're in this room, you are the person primarily responsible for making that happen. And the question I have for you then is, how many people are there in your organization that will be equally yoked with you, that will be as committed to this project as you are, that will work just as hard? Those are your partners. Now, if you are the executive director of your organization, you might have a development director that's going to be just as committed. There may be an assistant development director in a larger organization, so there might be 2 or 3 of you on staff. If you are, depending on the scale of your organization, maybe there's a program director whose funding is so directly tied, or whose program is so directly tied to your funding that they too would be equally committed. But remember, not every employee, not everyone on the staff will be as committed as to this as you are. There may be someone on your board that is committed as much as you are, that's willing to volunteer the dozens and dozens of hours that would be required to really be a partner with you. And there may be a volunteer. In all volunteer organizations, of course, that's all you'll have to lean on and rely on. But in any case, you're going to organize a group that may be 3 to 10 people in size that are the partners. And these are the people that will attend every planning meeting. And there will be, at least a planning meeting every week. You're going to hold each other accountable. You're going to be doing real work. So a lot of time. The next tier down are champions. And typically the champions will be volunteers, maybe board members. They may be staff people who aren't in the development team, but who are passionate or who benefit from the financing directly, or who have some client-facing responsibility. But you may have other people on the staff that would be champions, who would be spending somewhat less time, but who would be willing to actively organize themselves to campaign on behalf of the crowdfunding effort. And then finally, you'll have boosters. Boosters are the people who show up spontaneously when you launch your crowdfunding campaign and behave just like your champions, some of whom will be more effective than your champions. And the only difference between them and your champions are that you should have asked them to do this and forgot, right? You didn't know they were willing and didn't ask them. That's really the only difference. So they're probably not going to end up being part of the planning before the campaign starts. But you've got to hope and pray you have a few of these show up. And in a big campaign, you will. I've indicated some rough gauges of the kinds of dollars that sort of come in fairly automatically with people who commit to do this. So a partner might be $2,000, champions $1,000, boosters $500. But the fact is, if you do what I'm going to teach you to do today, you can get multiples of that from each level. So let's talk about your network. The key thing in understanding your network, and each person needs to do this, right? Ultimately, as you formalize your your reconnaissance stage, you're going to have each one of the partners and each one of the champions should be going through this exercise of assessing their own networks. But you'll start with your own network, right, personally. So you're going to look at all of the friends that you have in your Rolodex and your Twitter and your Facebook and your LinkedIn and anywhere else you have social media. But one of the things I want you to remember is you really, what you want to do ultimately here is count your friends. But your friends only count if you have an email or a phone number for them. If you can only reach them through Facebook or Twitter, you really can't reach them effectively enough to count them. That's a little bit disappointing, I know. But on Facebook, for a lot of people, you can access an email. That's usual. Most of your friends will share that with you. On LinkedIn, it's inherent, right? You can you can download all of your LinkedIn contacts if you're on LinkedIn. One of the things I like to remind people about with LinkedIn, not to forget it, is what do all of the people on LinkedIn have in common?
Jobs.
They have jobs, which means they have money. And you would like some of that, right? So, thank you.